My dad said I couldn't join the family business because it wasn't for girls, so I built my own empire. And what I did next made him beg for a job. Growing up, all I ever wanted was to be part of the shop. My dad owned a chain of auto body repair stores across Central Texas. Nothing flashy, just honest work. Oil changes, alignments, dent repairs. The kind of place where mechanics still knew your name. And the office always smelled like tires and old coffee. I was 8 the first time he let me hold a wrench. I still remember the feel of the cool metal in my hands. Too big for my fingers, but just right in my heart. He was replacing the brake pads on some beat-up Honda, and I handed him tools, watching his every move like it was art. That's where I fell in love, with the work, not just the man, with the idea of taking something broken and making it whole again. But love wasn't enough. As I got older, I started asking questions. Started showing up after school, hanging around the shop, offering to help. My older brother, Mason, got handed the golden key without ever asking. I had to beg for scraps. And even then, I got nothing but shrugs and sideways glances. "This isn't really for girls," Dad said once. I was 15, standing in coveralls I'd bought with my own money, grease already on my hands. It's not that you can't do it, it's just not a good look. Customers expect men in this line of work. That line burned itself into my skin. I watched Mason screw up time and time again. He didn't even like the business. Showed up late, barely learned anything. But Dad kept grooming him like some reluctant prince. Meanwhile, I knew the inventory, the labor rates, the software they used for invoices. I watched YouTube videos after homework, studied engines like some kids study makeup tutorials. But none of it mattered. By the time I was 17, I stopped asking. Instead, I started saving. I worked 2 jobs, one at a grocery store, one at a small mechanic shop run by a woman named Carla. She was in her 40s, wore steel-toed boots and a permanent scowl, and knew more about transmissions than anyone I'd ever met. She didn't care that I was a girl. She cared that I showed up early, asked the right questions, and didn't complain about the cold. Carla taught me everything Dad refused to. How to rebuild a carburetor, how to run diagnostics, how to talk to customers like they mattered. She also taught me how to stand my ground. She'd say things like, "Don't wait for permission, kid. Build your own damn table." So I did. I got a small scholarship, went to a local community college, and took night classes in business management and auto technology. By day, I worked in shops. I moved around a lot, anywhere that would let me learn. I was 22 when I opened my own garage. It was tiny, just one lift, one bay, and barely enough space for a waiting area. I maxed out a small business credit card and borrowed a little from Carla. My boyfriend at the time thought I was insane. "You really think people are going to trust you with their cars?" he said once, half joking. We didn't last long after that. But the thing is, people did trust me. At first, it was just other women. Single moms, college girls, older ladies who'd been burned too many times. They told me horror stories about mechanics who upcharged, talked down to them, or flat out scammed them. I didn't just fix cars. I fixed the trust they'd lost. Word spread. By the end of my first year, I had to hire 2 more mechanics. One was a single dad, the other a Navy vet. Both amazing people. We built something honest, gritty, and completely ours. And I didn't name it after myself. I named it Grit and Grease, a nod to what got me there. Meanwhile, Mason had crashed the family business into a wall. Literally. He got caught running side hustles out of the shop. Cheap knockoff parts, shady repairs, stuff that got flagged by the state. Dad tried to cover for him, but eventually, the fines piled up. 3 of the 5 locations closed. The 2 remaining ones were hemorrhaging money. And me? I opened my 3rd location that year. That's when the calls started. First from Mom, "Your dad's having a hard time. Maybe you could talk to him." Then from Dad himself, "Just wanted to check in." He said like we hadn't gone years without speaking. "Heard you've got a pretty solid thing going." I knew what was coming. He wanted in. 3 days after the voicemail, my assistant buzzed my office. "There's a guy here," she said, her voice hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should be amused or alarmed. "Says his name is Ken. Claims he's your dad." I didn't answer right away. I was sitting behind the desk in my Fort Worth office, sleek, organized, everything finished in matte black and brushed steel, nothing like the greasy, cluttered chaos of Dad's shop growing up. It was intentional. My space didn't just say I made it. It said I redefined it. "Tell him I'll be right out." When I stepped into the lobby, there he was. My dad. The man who told me the garage life wasn't for girls, wearing the same oil-stained work boots he probably bought a decade ago, and a look that hovered somewhere between embarrassed and desperate. He stood up quickly, as if I might walk past him and disappear forever. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Don't call me that," I replied. Not cold, just direct. He nodded like he expected it. Maybe he did. The silence stretched. I gestured toward a small meeting room and walked in without looking back. He followed, slower than I remembered him ever moving. Once we sat down, he looked around the room like he was afraid to make eye contact with me. "You've done well," he said eventually. I didn't respond. "I mean it. I heard about your place." "Well, places. Grit and grease. Clever name. Still nothing from me." "I was hoping we could talk," he continued. "Things haven't been great. Mason, he kind of wrecked the Plano shop. Got caught overcharging customers. Word got out. Yelp's a nightmare. We're in a bad spot." I leaned back in my chair. "So what exactly are you here for, Dad?" He cleared his throat, ran a hand over his thinning hair. "I was wondering if you're hiring." I swear I felt the earth pause for a second. He wanted a job. At my company. The same man who once told me I'd be better off behind a desk or marrying someone successful now sat in front of me asking for a spot on my payroll. I took a long breath and looked him over. The years hadn't been kind. The sun had deepened the lines in his skin, and there was a weight to his posture he never carried before. Pride didn't sit as tall on his shoulders anymore. "You really don't have anyone else who can help?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shook his head. "Mason's burned bridges I didn't even know existed. The bank's pulling financing. We've had to close another location. I sold my truck last week. I'm walking to jobs when I can find him." A flicker of something inside me softened, but I held my ground. "Why here?" He looked up, eyes tired. "Because you built something honest. Something that works. And because I was wrong. I see that now." I let the silence hang. I wanted to hear him say it. All of it. "I was wrong to shut you out," he added. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought the world would eat you alive. I didn't want to believe it was because of my own bias, but it was." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. I could have said no right then and there. Sent him back out the way he came. But something in me didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. So I said, "You can start next week. Front desk. Customer service." His mouth fell slightly open. "Not shop work." I raised an eyebrow. "I don't hand out lifts to people who haven't earned them. You'll earn yours. Or you won't." He nodded. "Okay. And you'll be reporting to Carla." That made him flinch. Carla was now our regional manager. The same woman who took me in when he wouldn't give me the time of day. She was 10 times the leader he ever was, and he knew it. "Understood," he said quietly. As he left that day, I sat for a long while in that same chair, unsure if I felt relief, pride, or something closer to sadness. When he showed up for his first day, he wore a clean polo shirt and khakis. Carla walked him through the onboarding process like she would with anyone else. Firm, efficient, no extra kindness. He didn't expect it, but he didn't push back either. I watched from my office camera. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to see what humility looked like on the man who told me I didn't belong. He was quiet, polite, awkward. He greeted customers like a guy who didn't remember how to be in service of others. The team didn't know who he was to me, and I didn't tell them. He didn't either. He just clocked in and out like the rest of them. Carla later told me, "He doesn't ask for favors. Doesn't slack. Kind of just exists." That was fine by me. The truth is, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to make him miserable. I just wanted him to sit in the seat he once denied me, to feel what it's like to be treated as an outsider in a place you once believed you owned. I thought watching my dad clock in like a regular employee would bring some kind of catharsis. Like maybe I'd feel the satisfaction of balance being restored, the past being rewritten. But it wasn't that clean. Some days, I'd walk through the shop and see him typing into the scheduling system or wiping down the front counter, answering phones like he was just another guy trying to make a paycheck. And that's exactly what he was now. Just another guy. He didn't try to talk to me much during those early months. Maybe he thought silence would make it easier, or maybe he just didn't know how to face someone who no longer needed him. Either way, I kept my distance. I was busy expanding. We had just broken ground on a fourth grit and grease location in Austin, and I was flying back and forth between sites, training new hires, finalizing partnerships. I had become everything he said I couldn't be, and I did it without his help. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after he started, Carla knocked on my office door. She had that look on her face she gets when she doesn't want to deliver bad news, but will anyway. He's been decent, she said. Not lazy, not entitled. But today, I caught him talking to a vendor, and he referred to himself as the father of the owner. I raised my eyebrows. Thought you should know, she added. I told him to stick to the title on his badge. That night, I stayed late. He was still in the break room, sitting at the small table with a reheated burrito and scrolling through his phone. I didn't say anything when I walked in, just poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. He looked up, surprised. Didn't think you were still here. I usually am, I said. You said you wanted to work here, not claim it. He paused. Carla told you. She did. I wasn't trying to take credit, he muttered. Old habits. That's the thing, I said quietly. They're not old until you stop doing them. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded, slowly. I'm trying, you know. Trying to what exactly? To undo the damage, he said. To figure out what kind of dad I can be now, if any. That caught me off guard. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I think he finally believed himself. I used to think I was protecting you from failure, he said. Turns out, I was just afraid you'd prove me wrong. There it was. The thing I had waited nearly 15 years to hear. Not an apology for the sake of my ego, but an admission of fear, of smallness, of seeing my potential and still choosing to shrink it. I didn't say anything for a while, just let it sit there between us. Then I stood up and said, clock in tomorrow like everyone else, and leave the family title at the door. He nodded. The next day he did. From that point on, I started seeing changes. He started asking more questions, not just about tasks, but about people, about the systems I'd built, the partnerships I'd developed. One time, I caught him reading a training manual I wrote for new hires, his face tense with concentration. Another time, I overheard him telling a customer how proud he was of the shop and what it stood for. Not of me, of the work. That mattered more. Meanwhile, Mason's name came up again. Only this time, it was through a legal notice. He'd been sued by 2 former customers for a botched timing belt job and a false warranty claim. The family business was now officially under investigation. I heard from a distant cousin that my dad's old partner had pulled out. The original chain was dead in the water. But grit and grease. We were thriving. We got picked up by a local lifestyle magazine. They called us the most trusted shop in Texas and ran a feature about female-led businesses disrupting male-dominated industries. My inbox exploded. College students, young girls in trade programs, even women nearing retirement asking if there were opportunities to learn, to pivot careers, to belong. I hired 10 more people in 6 months. At our company picnic that fall, my dad showed up with a store-bought pecan pie and a folding chair. No loud entrances. No speeches. He sat near the grill, made small talk with a couple of junior techs, and kept mostly to himself. At one point, Carla handed him a plate and teased, "Not bad for the guy who used to say women can't fix carburetors." He smiled, a little embarrassed, and said, "Hell, most of them here could rebuild an engine blindfolded." That moment stuck with me. Not because it erased what happened, but because it meant he saw it now. All of it. We never fully fix things. Some families don't. But one day, as I was reviewing applications for regional manager roles, I saw his name in the stack. It was a quiet ask. No phone call. No, I deserve it. Just an application with a note attached. If I'm not the right fit, I understand. I'm proud either way. I didn't promote him, but I let him stay. And he never asked again. 6 months after the company picnic, I was invited to speak at a national auto innovation conference in Chicago. It was kind of surreal. This wasn't just local panels anymore. This was Ford execs, Tesla engineers, independent shop owners with decades of legacy, and a few startups trying to disrupt the space with flashy tools and AI diagnostics. I was slotted into the next generation of auto leadership keynote block. That name alone made me laugh. Because to my father's generation, leadership looked like dominance. It was loud, top-down, usually male, and always assumed. My style? Relational, community-oriented. I built things from the ground up, asked questions, admitted mistakes. Not because I was soft, but because I wanted to be right, not just in charge. I flew out with 2 of my team leads. We checked into a modest but clean hotel near the venue and spent the evening preparing the deck for my talk. I kept thinking about what I wanted to say, not to the room, but to someone like the girl I used to be. The one with calloused hands and too many doubts, who stayed silent when someone said she didn't belong. The conference hall was massive. My nerves hit about 20 minutes before my slot. But then something strange happened. Right before I was mic'd up, one of the organizers tapped me on the shoulder. "There's a man here," she said. "Older, says he's your father. He's not on the guest list, but he's being very polite. Said he's just here to listen." I froze for a second. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't even told him I was speaking. But I said, "Let him in." I don't know why. Maybe I wanted him to see me in a setting he never imagined I'd reach. Maybe I wanted him to see how far his dismissal had carried me, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The talk went well, better than I expected. I told a story, my story, but framed it through the lens of evolving industry values, of trust, equity, and redefining what leadership could look like in an era where transparency was everything. I said, "We don't just fix engines. We rebuild trust. We repair systems. We show up, especially when the people before us said we couldn't." I didn't cry. I didn't stumble. When I stepped off stage, I felt lighter. Later, as the crowd thinned and the panelists started networking, I saw him. My dad, standing near the back, hands in his jacket pockets, a small paper badge clipped to his collar that simply said, "Visitor." He gave me a nod. Not the kind that says, "Good job," but the kind that says, "I saw you." I returned it. That was enough. When I got back to Fort Worth, things started shifting in ways I hadn't expected. First, a journalist from a national business outlet reached out. They wanted to feature grit and grease in a profile about women transforming blue-collar sectors. Then came a partnership offer from an educational nonprofit looking to create hands-on learning centers for high school girls interested in trade work. I agreed to fund one. It was called the Lift Room, and I chose to build the first one right across the street from the strip mall where my dad's last shop once stood. I didn't tell him. I wanted him to see it on his own. A few weeks later, he walked into my office unannounced. I was reviewing marketing proofs for the Lift Room launch and didn't even look up until I heard him say, "So it's real, huh?" I nodded. "It's real." He sat down slowly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. "You know," he said after a beat, "when I was a kid, my dad didn't teach me how to fix anything. He just yelled at me when I got it wrong. That surprised me. He had 3 shops, but never let me touch anything until I was 18. Said it wasn't a place for screw-ups. I spent more time afraid of messing up than learning how to do it right." He looked down at his hands. "Still rough, still stained from years of work. I think I passed that fear on to you," he said. I closed the file on my laptop. "You did, but I turned it into something." He nodded. "I see that now." We sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence where nothing's really broken anymore, but the past still echoes in the background. Before he left, he asked if he could attend the opening of the Lift Room. As a guest, he added quickly, just to witness it. I said yes. When opening day arrived, we had a small crowd. Teachers, students, local leaders, and a few families who had supported us from day one. I gave a short speech, cut the ribbon, and invited the girls inside to see the equipment, the tools, the walls lined with posters of women welders, mechanics, engineers. And in the corner, near the back, stood my dad. He didn't say much, but I caught him wiping his eyes. The week after the Lift Room opened, I got a handwritten letter. No envelope, just folded paper left on my office chair. It said, "If I had seen back then what I see now, maybe I wouldn't have tried to shrink you into my world. Maybe I would have asked to be a part of yours. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm proud of you, more than I've ever been proud of anyone." Dad. I sat with that letter for a long time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't poetic, but it was the most honest thing he'd ever given me. There was something final about it, too, like he wasn't asking for anything anymore. Not validation, not recognition, just a chance to admit what had been eating at him in silence. And somehow, that mattered more than if he'd begged. Still, I didn't frame it or keep it in my desk. I folded it up, put it in the bottom drawer, under a stack of old invoices and manuals. Not because it didn't mean something, but because it wasn't meant to take up space anymore. I had moved past needing proof. Business boomed that fall. We opened our 5th grit and grease location in Phoenix. The Lift Room's pilot was so successful that the nonprofit asked if I'd partner on 3 more across the country. I was on the cover of a trade magazine and even got invited to be a guest judge for a high school auto design competition. My dad stayed on, still at the front desk, still clocking in like everyone else. still referring to Carla as boss, which cracked her up every time. But what surprised me most was the respect he earned, not because of who he had been, but because of how quiet and consistent he was now. The younger staff liked him. He offered to cover shifts without asking for recognition, started bringing in donuts once a week, told funny, self-deprecating stories about how not to fix a carburetor. I noticed something strange, too. The techs he once would have mocked, women, queer kids, guys with tattoos and piercings, he now treated with genuine curiosity and patience. Like he was learning not just how to work differently, but how to be different. And I never once saw him act like he owned the place. That mattered. One day, a new hire asked me in front of him, "Is it true that guy's your dad?" I looked over. He was sorting invoices near the printer. I said he is. They raised their eyebrows. Damn, that's wild. He's, like, super chill. I smiled. Took some time. My dad glanced up and gave a small nod. That evening, I found him waiting outside as I locked up. He asked if I had a second, and we stood under the parking lot lights, the building casting long shadows behind us. "You didn't have to keep me around," he said. "But you did. I didn't do it for you." He nodded. "I know. You did it despite me." We both chuckled, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "I'm sorry for what I said back then," he added. "About girls not belonging. About you not belonging. You were never the problem. My ego was." That landed heavier than I expected. I said, "You raised me thinking small was safe. That dreams were dangerous." "I did," he admitted. "But I kept dreaming anyway," I said. "And you know what? Turns out you were right about one thing." He tilted his head. "I don't belong in your world," I said, "because I built a better one." He smiled, not hurt, just quiet, accepting. "You did," he said. "That was the closest thing to a real ending we'd ever have." And honestly, it was enough. Months later, he quietly submitted his resignation. No drama, no excuses, just a short letter saying he'd like to step back and spend time rebuilding his personal life, maybe volunteer at a community garage. I hosted a small goodbye lunch, strictly for employees, no family labels. He hugged Carla, shook hands with everyone else, and when he got to me, he just said, "Thanks for giving me the chance to learn from you." I nodded. "Thanks for finally listening." He walked out with a little more dignity than he came in with. And somehow, that felt like justice. Not the dramatic kind, but the kind that sticks. The kind that heals in slow, quiet layers. These days, when people ask me how I got into the business, I tell them the truth. I wasn't supposed to. Not by the standards I grew up with. But I did anyway. Because when people tell you where you don't belong, sometimes the best thing you can do is build a place where you, and others, finally do. And if that place grows big enough, even the ones who doubted you will have to walk through your doors one day and call you boss. Not out of fear, but because you earned it. Because you didn't just prove them wrong, you redefined what right looks like. And that's what legacy really is.